am joined by the amazing author Angel Hawkins,
Mm.
written an amazing book all about grief. So that's the topic that she's going to teach us on today. Just give me a moment to share this on my page and we will get started.
Fantastic.
So excited!
I am too, Rhoda. I'm on pins and needles.
This is going to be awesome.
Absolutely.
Okay, so here we are. We're live on YouTube. Share this. We are live. Join us to learn about. Awesome. So, just for the people to get to know you a bit, because they don't know your awesome self, I have some questions to ask you.
Okay.
First question is, if you could spend a weekend with any two people in the world, who would you pick?
Oh my goodness. Okay. So, with it being 2020 and locked in the house, quarantined all year, I think we've all come to really appreciate our relationships and spending time with our loved ones. And so, the way that I would answer that is I would spend time with my good girlfriends. We would steal away, go to a cabin in the mountains somewhere, and we'd have lots of food and we dance, we chit chat, just a big old slumber party. And so that's what I would do.
Sounds so perfect. I love
Yeah.
it. And do you have any pets?
Do I have any pets? I do. I do. So I have a 7-year-old dog. His name is Bobo. He's a Catan, which most people don't know what that is. He looks a lot like a Maltese, but he has hair instead of fur. And so he's the man of the house. But we also have a new little baby, and he's a 9-week golden doodle, and his name is T'Challa.
Oh, how adorable!
Yeah.
That is so amazing. You are, what do they call it? Dog mom.
So I'm not the traditional dog mom, dog person. I didn't grow up with pets, and so this is an all new experience, and so I'm learning right along with them.
Oh, I love it. I love it. I love it. So let's get straight into the topic for today.
Okay.
First question is, what is grief actually?
What is grief? So, to me, grief is many things. A lot of people refer to it as the price that you pay for loving intensely when that person separates from you. Grief comes in many forms, and to be honest, we're constantly dealing with grief. It's not always the death of someone, sometimes it's the death of a relationship, sometimes it's the death of an experience. And all throughout life, we're constantly dealing with some form of grief. If you go back to your elementary school days when you graduated from kindergarten to go to the first grade, that was the death of an experience. And on the other side of that, obviously we didn't know what to expect, but there was more. There was first grade waiting on you in second grade. So to me, my grown up imagination has been able to realize that death is separation and it is the moving on to the next stage.
Wow, that is a powerful definition. So much for that. And I love how you mentioned it's not just about death specifically, but just the end of a relationship.
Yeah.
Very good. So, what happened in your life personally that introduced you to grief if you've experienced it?
So, in 2016, my mother was diagnosed with lung cancer. And from August of 2016 through May of 2017, I walked alongside of her as she battled that disease. And so that was my first real intimate, up close, and in your face experience with grief. Interestingly enough, I started grieving even before she passed away, before that was even the known outcome. There was grief that transpired just over the change in our interaction, the change in our relationship. We went from, basically living life to the fullest, and all of our conversations were, exciting and entertaining, to our conversations being all about, basically fighting this disease and what were the latest symptoms and what could we do, to take care of her better, and what's the latest from the doctors and all of that. And so there was the inception of grief began long before she passed away. So when she finally did pass away in May of 2017, that is when another version of grief showed up.
Oh, wow. Wow, wow, wow. So what was your initial reaction when you found out your mom was very sick?
Oh, goodness. My initial reaction was we were going to fight it. My initial reaction was she was a strong lady of faith. And so I grew up with that mindset. And I believed that between her faith, my faith, and our relationship with God, that we were going to be able to conquer it, or at least in the way that I envisioned us conquering it. And so it was truly, I just had a made up mind that my mother had never said she was going to do something and didn't do it. So when she said that she was going to beat this disease, I believed her wholeheartedly. And so it was really just a matter of walking that out. But interestingly enough, in the midst of that, we would have daily conversations. She, I, and my sister, we would get on the phone every day and, just kind of catch up on what was going on. And we would have these daily prayers that we would have together. And the prayer started out being one that dealt with healing. We were praying for healing. And midway through the journey, God changed the prayer. He wouldn't allow me to pray for healing for my mom. The prayer evolved into your will, let your will be done. And so, there was realization that was taking place that this isn't going to turn out the way that we initially had hoped and expected. And so there was a period of time where there was an adjustment taking place just for me mentally, accepting that, as well as still carrying the burden and the weight of trying to make sure that I was there to support my mom at all cost. Not showing, for me, it was important to put her needs first. And I don't know if that's the right thing to do, but certainly I wanted to make sure that she was well and that she was okay with what was happening. And so I made sure to put her needs first. I made sure to present myself the strongest possible, and not let on that I was struggling. I was struggling with the idea that she wouldn't be around. I was struggling with the idea of my faith, and that I had believed that something was going to happen, so intensely. I believed that there was going to be healing on this side of heaven, so intensely, that when I knew that that was no longer the case, there was definitely some behind the scenes acceptance that I had to do, but I was still trying to show a strong front for my mother's well-being.
Wow.
Yeah.
Wow, wow, wow. That's understandable. That's very
Absolutely.
understandable. And you did well to even like try to support her and help her. So that's
Yeah, but I think with that, sometimes we do a disservice to ourselves. And the reason I say that is because we fail to have the real conversation, right? This is Real Talk with Rhoda. We fail to have the real conversation. What if I would have shared with my mother that I was afraid? What if I would have shared with myself, allowed myself to acknowledge that I wasn't sure, how I was going to be able to deal with all of this, how I was going to be able to deal with the change in our relationship and her no longer being here. I think that's the conversation that we have to have. I think those are the things that we need to talk about that so often we don't.
Right. Totally agree with you. I totally agree. So what are so those how you reacted, right, might be different to how someone else initially responds.
Mhm.
I ask you how did you react once she did pass away?
When she initially passed away, I forced myself to believe that I was okay with it. So I became really annoyed when people would come to me and express their condolences. And it was because I was trying to convince myself that as a Christian, as a faith believer, we believe our reward is in heaven. And so death shouldn't be a solemn experience, or at least that's what I told myself. And so I became really annoyed when people would say, I'm sorry for your loss, because I felt like she's not lost. I know where she's at. Stop saying that to me. So I was really offended. I denied the fact that my heart was broken. And obviously, when someone passes away, you have the responsibility of getting, the arrangements together and all of that. So I busied myself with those tasks and making sure that everybody else was okay, making sure that my daughter was okay and my sister and, my father and just whoever else. And so I stayed busy. And it wasn't until I returned home back to Atlanta at the time, and I was by myself and it was quiet. And I had this lump in my throat that wouldn't allow me to swallow, it wouldn't allow me to talk. The air seemed as if it was just so heavy I couldn't breathe. Um, and at that point, I had to acknowledge that I wasn't okay. I had to acknowledge that my heart was broken. And I had to acknowledge that I did not know how to handle it at the time. So there was certainly a feeling of um, there was a feeling of betrayal. I felt as if my mom betrayed me. She wasn't supposed to leave. She died. There was a feeling of being deserted. Along the entire journey when my mother was alive, I felt God's presence. I felt him near. And after my mom passed away and I was at home, initially I felt I couldn't feel him. And so I felt like he deserted me too. And I had to figure out, basically how to breathe and how to exist in this world, and also how to discover God for myself. I had spent so many years leaning into my faith through my mother's strength. And so now that she was gone, I had to, learn how to gain my balance and figure out where I was along my walk with God, my walk along with myself, figure out who I was. When you lose someone that's so close to you, particularly a parent, or a mate or a sibling, I would imagine would be very similar. You lose a part of yourself and you lose a part of your identity. And so I had to get to know myself all over again.
Wow. Thank you for sharing. Like you're really helping even just explaining your process. I'm sure someone can definitely relate.
Awesome.
Yeah. So I was gonna say before, um, there's many different types of ways people react to death,
Mhm.
right? Or even separation of a relationship. So, what are like some possible reactions one can have after someone?
Oh, so, I think that there's 5, like, okay, so I'm definitely not a clinician of any sort, but I do believe that there's like 5 stages of grief, right? And so these are the 5 stages that people typically deal with, and it's denial. It's denial, anger, what is it, bargaining, depression, and then acceptance. So I think that those are definitely the responses that one encounters along the journey. For me, one of the things that I experienced was isolation. I did not feel as if anyone could identify with what I was going through. Grief is such an uncomfortable state to be in, uncomfortable for the people you're surrounded by. So the people that know you traditionally, that know you, under normal circumstances, they're used to you being a certain way. And so when grief comes, for me, what I experienced was I now became a different version of me. I wasn't necessarily my bubbly, outgoing personality. I was doing a lot of in depth internal dialogue and soul searching and all of that. And so it made it uncomfortable for those who are typically around you. They don't know what to say. People are very uncomfortable when with sadness. People are very uncomfortable with depression and being around someone that's in that state. And so what we try to do is we try to hurry someone along and push them back into their regular selves so that we feel better being around them, right? We don't know what to say when someone passes away. We don't know how to exist. And so for me, it was much more comfortable to be isolated, to either be around someone that could relate to what I was going through, or someone that was comfortable being quiet or not expecting the old version of me. So I think definitely for other people, they may experience isolation, um, and also shock, right? So death and grief, it's trauma. And so there's a period of shock that one may experience, and that might be part of that denial stage. I'm uncertain of that. But once again, for me, it was being out and about in familiar settings, but not remembering how to get home, not remembering, the simplest of things, whether it be my phone number or going to the doctor's office and not remembering which building to go into. Things that I had done on the regular now seemed very unfamiliar. And I think that that's also something that people experience is definitely shock.
Wow, that makes sense. That makes sense. And I did write down the 5 stages of grief. So if people want to like Google that, research further, they can. But I love
Absolutely.
isolation and shock. And about isolation, is it wise to stay isolated?
No, here's the thing. So there's an awareness that I think we all have. I don't think, and once again, I'm not a clinician, so just from my personal experience, I knew I was depressed, right? I knew that I was grieving, I knew that I was sad. But I also respected the journey. I gave myself permission to be sad for a period of time. I gave myself permission to walk through the process, to walk through the journey, because I definitely had loved my mother. It would be odd to lose a loved one and think that, by Monday you lose them on Friday and by Monday morning you're back at work and it's as if it didn't happen. I think that that would be odd. But I think what we have to be mindful of is trying to grieve in a healthy way or as healthy as possible. So being aware, obviously you might not bathe today, but it probably wouldn't be wise to go an entire week without bathing. And these are things that some people might do. They just don't feel the need to move on. They don't feel, nothing matters. One thing that I would encourage any and everyone to do is seek counseling, whether it be through your faith leader or whether it be through professional means. I think it's important to speak with someone that has the tools and the understanding to help you walk through that journey. And so that was key for me. That was actually what gave me permission to grieve, right? I tried to feed a line to my counselor that, I was doing fine and nothing was happening. And she was able to successfully break through that wall. And she gave me permission to not be okay with it, gave me permission to even question God or to tell him that I was angry with him. I remember that there was a moment in my home where, obviously being a parent, I try to monitor basically how I am around my daughter and, certainly want to make sure that I'm not negatively impacting her through my emotions. And so she had gone to bed and I went downstairs and I just felt this, intense emotion and just sadness. And I remember, basically lining up the pillows on my couch and punching and jumping and, throwing them and whatever else. Now, nothing was harmed in my home, but I was able to physically release that energy that I was feeling at the time, as opposed to letting it just bubble up in my body and come out in other ways. So I think it's important to get the tools that you need, get the counsel that you need, and the support that you need.
That's really good advice. Thank you for being so transparent. Again, everything you're saying is so helpful and it makes sense. Like it really, really makes sense. You talked about a journey and process of healing. What else did your process look like apart from counseling and learning to release your emotions?
Yeah, so my journey has been one that I have. It's been unique to me. And so, one of the things that happened for me when my mother passed away was I got really clear about what it was that I wanted in life and what I did not want. I no longer had time just to be, on the fence about certain things. Death has a way of doing that to you. And so I became very clear about what was important for my sanity and well being. One of the things that I actually end up doing, and I know that everybody can't do this and probably shouldn't do this, but I actually ended up relocating. I knew that I needed space to grieve. I needed almost a different a different environment just to feel the freedom to to seek God, to seek understanding. And so for me, that involved relocating. Everybody doesn't have to do that and probably shouldn't do it, but I had the wherewithal to be able to do that. And so I went to the desert. I relocated to Nevada, and I made things a whole lot simpler in my life. So I ended up giving away a lot of things that just didn't have much value to me any longer. All for the sake of looking for peace and looking for safety and support and just once again the freedom to find my relationship and understanding with God. So it involved relocating. It involved I went a year without watching television. Yeah, I had no desire. I wasn't interested. I wasn't interested in, the typical reality TV shows I was watching or sitcoms and stuff. What was important was getting understanding, understanding about these new feelings that I have and this new experience and who am I and what am I, what am I supposed to do on this earth? Is, this time winding up? Those series of questions, they come to you in the wake of loss. And so for me, it was a literal journey. It was discovery. And so I think that that's probably a form of that some people embark upon. It's a form of discovery. It might not look like relocating and giving away all your stuff and not watching TV for a year. But certainly for me, that is what I did, and I'm appreciative of it.
Right. So it sounds like you're saying one positive thing about loss, right, is that you have like a reset button, I guess.
Oh, absolutely. I'm sorry.
Yeah, you can like take life more seriously, discover your purpose, your gifts, go deeper in God, asking Him tough questions. A lot of Christians feel like we can't ask God why and we can't be upset with God, but we can. And it's healthy to be like you said and you did. So that makes me happy to know that something good can come out of loss.
A lot of good came out of it, Rhoda. I think the mask comes off.
Mm.
And what I mean by that is, I think as a result of loss, I've become my truest self. I no longer feel the need or the unction to um, people please, if you will, or to deny what I'm feeling and experiencing, all for the sake of making someone comfortable. Doesn't mean that I'm mean and harsh and rude. It just means that I've become intolerant with not being authentic and genuine.
Right. That is so good. And you even said your self confidence as well.
Yeah. So once again, your dynamic has shifted, and so for me, my mom was certainly my. I always called her my personal cheerleader. So she was my place of support and safety. And so once she was no longer in that role in that way anymore, I had to learn how to rely on me and rely on my thoughts and my wisdom and my understanding. Obviously, that comes from God, but I had to discover that for myself. And so there's a maturation that happens that wouldn't necessarily happen in other ways. And I guess what I liken that to, um, and that is, when Jesus had been crucified and was raised, and that period of time before he ascended, and he was with his disciples, and he had to tell them, I've got to go away so the Comforter can come. There was, basically there had to be this separation so that my growth in God, the Comforter, could come for me and be with me and encourage and mature me.
Wow, that is such a powerful thought. Perspective. I was like, preach, teach, come on, bring Jesus into this. Yes.
Not to bring him into it. So
Right.
yeah, I wouldn't even try.
Aw. Wow, thank you for sharing that. So I remember before you said counseling is something you'd recommend. What
Mhm.
other advice can you give us on grieving healthily?
Um, Once again, I think that one of the things that's important is being honest with yourself. It's also surrounding yourself with healthy circumstances and healthy environments, right? So, a lot of times, because we're trying to avoid certain unpleasant feelings, we find outlets and vices to, basically distract us from the feeling that we're experiencing. And so I would encourage, anyone who is grieving at this time to find it within yourself, find the strength within yourself to avoid those vices. At the time, I was certainly cognizant of, on occasion, I might have had a glass of wine prior to grief, but because I was grieving, um, I made sure not to even pick up a drink at home because I didn't want to basically experience, that temporary sedative and find relief in that, and start depending on that. So I think it's definitely making sure that you're aware of your environment, making sure who you're around, that you have support. If you don't have support, finding, if you don't have, basically your daily healthy interactions and relationships, finding that, there's resources on the web, and organizations out there that provide grief counseling and mental health services to help you overcome whatever you're going through. Something that was therapeutic for me was also writing a letter. I did a lot of journaling. I did a lot of writing, hence, the book that I was able to produce. But it was a way for me to pour out my emotions in a safe place, and be as transparent and raw as I needed to be without judgment. So those are some of the things that I would recommend.
That is amazing and practical. Thank you. And so, for the person grieving, I think before you mentioned how people around them might not know what to do because not many of us know how to deal with sadness. So, is it up to the person who's grieving to say, hey, I need you to listen right now, or come hang out with me, or give me space? Like, you know what I mean?
Yeah, so I think that there is an onus on the person that's grieving to be able to speak up and tell people what you need, right? So, that's, once again, you become very clear when you're experiencing pain. A lot of times, you don't hold back. If you need to say ouch, you say ouch, right? And so the same thing occurs when you're grieving. If someone's pressuring you to do something you're not ready to do, such as, you may not be ready to go to the Christmas party right now, after experiencing a loss last week. And that's okay. Express that. Let them know, hey, I'm not quite ready yet. But I do appreciate you being there. I appreciate you, offering. We can't expect people to read our minds. We can't expect people to automatically know what it is that we need. Sometimes we're fortunate enough where we're surrounded by people that know how to give you space, know what to say, know just to listen and not say anything. But sometimes we have people in our lives that we need to kind of help along. And what I mean by that is just speaking up and saying, I'm really not ready for that, or I don't feel like talking right now. So there's a balancing act that I think has to occur. And because we care about our relationships, because we care about the people that's in our lives, I think that there's certainly an importance in making sure that we are honest about how we feel in the moment.
That's so good. Thank you. Because I've had people who are like, oh, my friends aren't talking to me and they don't know what to do when they've lost someone. And I'm kind of like, you said we can't read your mind. So it's good that you said they should speak up.
Yeah, one of the things that was important to me is that from time to time I would get a text message just to say, "Hey, I'm thinking about you," or I'd get a card in the mail, or maybe even a phone call, and just say, "Hey, I know you're going through, but just know that I love you, and I'm thinking of you. I'm praying for you," or whatever the case was. Those little small interactions meant the world, because it reminded me that, there are people who are in my corner and care about me. And so, it's okay if you don't know what to say. It's okay if you don't know what to do in order to be there to support your person that's grieving. Sometimes it's just the small things that make a huge difference. It's just saying, "Hey, I'm here," and really being there. One of the things that I think is interesting is that when someone's going through grief or experiencing some form of loss, typically conversations help, but we feel like we, may be bombarding you with, talking about our loved one or talking about our experience. And so for that, we might bottle that up and not share it. So being given the space to share means the world, being told that, I'm here to listen if, or even having that person initiate the conversation. I would love when someone had a story about my mom, or, that meant a lot. That told me that that person was in tune and was okay with um, me being in a space needing to talk about my mom, or, experience her in some kind of way.
Got you. Thank you so much. This advice you're saying is so life changing. You're just equipping us for life to help people like when they experience grief.
Awesome.
Good.
Awesome.
Thank you. You were fortunate, I'd say, in a way, to know your mom might pass, right? And like
Yeah.
to be there when she did. Do you have any advice for people who never got to say goodbye to their loved ones or attend their funerals? Especially because of COVID, for example, you know?
Yeah, certainly my heart goes out to anyone who has not had the opportunity to properly say goodbye to their loved one. Certainly with, funerals and memorials and such, we have the opportunity to get closure. Closure is important, right? And so when our loved ones are snatched away from us, or in situations like you said right now with COVID, where either we can't go and congregate and grieve our loved one, there's closure that's missing, right? And so, what I would suggest and encourage is you have to find a way to get your own form of closure. And maybe that's it might be in writing a letter to your loved one, telling them what they meant to you, expressing, how you feel, and remembering them in that respect. I'm a huge writer. I love to journal and all of that. But that was one of the things actually that my counselor suggested that I do. And I think that that works in situations such as, when you don't have the ability to get that formal closure through funeral, if you will, or you haven't had time to prepare for someone's passing. And it was writing a letter to your loved one, but using your non-dominant hand. And what that does is it forces you to be specific about what it is that you want to say. You don't flower, you don't fill it with a bunch of filler language. You get down and dirty with what it is that you need to say to that person in order to release them. And so I would recommend that. There's also other ways that I know people have gone about getting closure, and that might be things such as, balloon releases where you write, a message on the balloon or something, special regarding that person, and you release it, up into the sky. And with that's a form of it's an act of closure, it's an act of release. And so I would recommend things in along that line if possible.
That's really good. Thank you for that. So, what are some ways we can tell that we have processed our grief properly and now we're kind of on the other side?
Good question. So for me, it was going outside, wanting to go outside and re-engage in life. It was wanting to go outside and take walks, wanting to experience nature, experience living things. I remember walking outside and realizing that the flowers had bloomed, and I couldn't remember, well, when did they bloom? Did they just bloom, or had they been here a while? It was recognizing that the colors were so vibrant and all of that. It was wanting to once again turn on the television. For me, I went that entire year. Actually, I went a little bit longer without a TV in my bedroom. And, it was, hey, I think I want to turn on the TV. I think I want to watch something. It was feeling comfortable again in social settings and, wanting to go and experience life again. I think that that is certainly an indicator that we're ready to move on. It was also knowing that I can speak about my loved one without that lump sitting in my throat, that had initially set up home there. So it was that, and I think that those are some indicators that we are moving to the other side of grief. I don't know if we ever get over grief, if we ever get to the point where we're no longer in our grief journey. Um, I don't know. I haven't experienced that yet. For me, it's evolved. It's looked a little different. So that's what I think, happens for others as well.
Got you. Mm-hmm. You make sense. Yeah, I don't think you can fully. I don't know. That's why I didn't want to use the word overcome. You know.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yeah.
It's really helpful when you notice you start engaging with life again, wanting to get back out there again. That's a good sign that you're doing the journey well.
Yeah, I think so. And I think with that, we also have to be mindful that there may be times when we still want to, then I might have a day or a moment where I just kind of want to be alone, and I might, hear a song and cry, but I don't stay there. And so I think that that's the key is, the period of time in which you're mourning or which you're experiencing that sadness at the moment. It's short periods of time. It's not that long stretch, it's not several days. It might be an hour, it might be a moment, it might be a day. I don't know, but it's certainly shorter.
Yes, ma'am. I was actually going to ask you that. Like, what do you do if you have a flashback or things pop up? So I love how you said don't stay there.
Yeah, so I mean, we're in the holidays right now, right? And so this is a time when typically we think about gathering and family, and everyone is upbeat and hopeful and all of that. And so this is a time where it really triggers people who have experienced loss. And so it's learning how to do the holidays, in a different way. And I think you're mindful of the fact that your loved one is not present, but you may be in a place where you're now able to reflect on those memories and find peace and joy in them, as opposed to finding sorrow in the fact that they're not there. You're grateful that you've had those moments and that you can remember them, and you can still experience that loved one through your memories or different mementos that you have.
Awesome. Got it. um, so how should we think of death? I know a lot of people are scared of death. Some of us like to pretend it doesn't even exist. Like, what is a healthy way to think of death?
Yeah, so I think we need to start having conversations about it, to be honest. I know that in all of my growing up, didn't really have a conversation about death. I certainly, had my own vision of what it would be like and all of that. But I think we have to start having these conversations, particularly in our community. We don't prepare one another for death. And so I think it starts with the conversation. For me, it certainly involved digging into, my word and trying to understand. And even the Bible refers to it as a mystery. So I think that there has to be a level of acceptance that We don't know all that's going to happen. With our earthly imaginations and minds, we don't have the capacity to clearly understand what all takes place. But certainly, God has been kind enough to give us, some information along the way to kind of help us, process it once again with our natural earthly minds. But one thing that certainly I lean into is it says, "Let not your heart be troubled." And that's the scripture where God talks about He goes to prepare a place. And my Father's house has many mansions, and if it weren't so, I would have told you. And so it's finding comfort in the fact that there is a prepared place, that death is not the end. He didn't say that was the end. He said that you will be with me, that I'm preparing something for you. And so it's finding solace in that. And I think that those are the conversations that we have to have about death, as well as, the more business side conversations, if you will. What are your wishes? How do you wish, what do you want your family to handle, in terms of how do you want your body handled? Where do you want your final resting place to be? It's those things. It's those mature conversations that I think help us to prepare and take the sting, and the confusion out of the process of dying.
That is so good. Thank you for sharing. So my next question for you is, do you have any therapy like sessions you do or resources that can help us with grief?
So, I'm not a therapist by any stretch of the imagination, but I have taken it upon myself. I was actually just led by God to chronicle my journey with my mom, and I've put together my first book that I know, right? And so I put together my first book, which chronicles my journey alongside my mom, as she battled cancer, and we, walked that walk together. And so that now is available, and it's available on Amazon and by both paperback and ebook. And it's called "I Will Always: A Daughter's Memoir, Faith and Fight." And in that book, it certainly has started a lot of conversations that I have been notified of. A lot of people have reached out and let me know that it's got them thinking about, grief and dealing with an aged parent and dealing with loss and, those tough, difficult conversations that aren't happening. It's helped them to get those started. And so that certainly is a resource. And it was my intent and my hope that my story would certainly spark some of those conversations and get them started. And along with that, I'm actually in the midst of creating a journal to accompany the book. Yeah, and so it will have writing prompts within the journal just to help individuals flush out, the emotions and the experiences that they are having with dealing with grief. So I hope to have that available for release in the coming spring. Um, but also, I would just encourage individuals to also seek, once again, professional counseling. Reach out to your pastors, and make appointments there to get that spiritual support as well as that mental support that's needed. I think on, what is it, counseling.org, they have a lot of resources available that also deal with grief. And then also, I'm hoping over the next couple of months to be able to put together a platform for individuals to share their own grief stories and so forth. So more will be coming out about that I'll certainly share on social media.
Yes, come through and help the people. We want to learn from you. Yes, and definitely, guys, get her book on Amazon. I'll put the link in the bio, but for now, I just wrote what it is in the comments.
Yeah, here's the book. You know, you can find it on Amazon, and yeah, so I'm excited. I'm excited and grateful.
Congratulations, and thank you for writing such a meaningful book. Like that
Thank
is
you.
life changing and amazing.
Thank
You said social media, so where can the people follow you on social media?
Yes, I'm on social media. You can find me on Facebook under my name, Angel Hawkins. Also, you can find me. I have another page that I have that I write little, just encouraging little quips and little posts that I put out there to hopefully get your thoughts stirred in terms of just faith and daily things that we go through as people and whatnot. But that's underneath As She Speaks. And you can also find me on Instagram underneath As She Speaks. And then if you need to reach out to me via email, I can be reached by Ash Books Global, and that's ASH Books Global at gmail.com.
Awesome. And I did put those links in the description of this video so you guys can easily
Fantastic.
and find her. And if you want to book this amazing woman to teach your people about grief or about the book, teach her book, something, email her at ashbookgirl@gmail.com. You're seriously one of the best people I've ever interviewed. Like, you're so answer the questions so well, and you make sense, and you just flow. Like, you're very pleasant to listen to. So I'm so honored I got to interview you today.
Thank you.
Amazing feedback on this video. So God richly bless you, and thank you for doing this.
Thank you so much, my sweet Rhoda. You know, there's nothing I wouldn't do for you, but I certainly appreciate just the opportunity to be here and to chat with you a little bit. But thank you for this platform. I know that it is going to do amazingly well. It's so needed. And I am just so excited that you are a willing vessel and so much is in store for you. So thank you for your bravery and your wisdom and just your heart.
Oh, thank you, Titi. I appreciate it. Thank you so much. So for anyone watching, if you have any questions about what Angel said, definitely reach out to her. She's open to answer your questions. And if you do want to book her for something, email her ASAP. Okay? Period. Thank you.
Period.
I love you so much. Have a really good night. And good night, everyone. Thank you so much for tuning in. And I'll see you guys again tomorrow to continue the series. Thank you, Angel.
Thank you, Love Bug.